There we go. Okay, creating your org chart. Software development is a very intense political and sociological process. Let me just start off with that. Actually, one of the great insights I had, I got from Tom Affinito, who was at Halogen at the time. I was there for a developers conference, and we were talking specifically about the challenges of coming up with a architecture for a particular project. And he said, and ultimately, architecture, software architecture, is a political act. And that struck me. I never heard someone state it that way. I'm a technologist and so on. But he was right in that it involves trade-offs and gaining consensus. That's true, generally speaking, for, oh, by the way, before I do anything more, the other thing I found, there we go, was that it was very hard to see the slides on the videotape lectures. These are all up on YouTube. I have links to them at the course website. So, and they're open. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But if you're in the middle of midterm, it's like, what did he say in that one lecture? You can actually go and, preferably with headphones, look up the lecture. Division of labor is one of those essential human inventions that, even though we are inclined at times to say, oh, wouldn't it be great if everyone just was responsible for everything? And there have been attempts to sort of do that, and they usually fall apart because you have the core issue of making decisions. And decisions involve trade-offs. You can try and set up a collective thing where you all get everyone together and you all vote on making the trade-offs, and then you get divisions within it because 3 voted this way and 2 voted that way, and so on and so forth. We won't, recapitulate human political history here. But within a software development effort, it is very useful to have clear division of labor, clear communication lines, hopefully aligned around what your particular talents and interests are. But part of the reality is sometimes you get assigned a task that you're not particularly interested in, but it needs to be done. And you pitch in and get it done and do your best job and so on. Now, there are 2 key issues here. These are links to 2 of my writings, so if you read those, you'll actually be ahead on some of the readings later in the semester. Conway's Law, which actually Fred Brooks mentions, says that the architecture of a software system reflects the communication lines of the organization that developed it. I'll repeat that. The architecture of a software system reflects the communication lines, if you will, the org chart of the organization that developed it. Because of that, you want to think carefully. Now, we're sort of putting cart before the horse then here, because I'm asking for an org chart about 3 weeks before you have to do architecture. But for each of your respective projects, you need to think carefully about what the project is going to require and how you want to organize to solve those problems, how you're going to divide up that work. The other thing, and this is something I discovered independently, but DeMarco and Lister, when we read Peopleware, also talk about it. What are the goals? Why are each of you on these projects? That's a useful discussion to have. Why did you choose for which of the 3 projects you chose? Why are you on there? What do you hope to accomplish besides an A in my course? And yes, which is a noble and worthwhile goal. Okay, we'll just establish that right off the bat. You don't need to be ashamed of that. When I was doing Pages, the startup, we had some real divisions among the development team. This is a great development team, probably the single finest group of engineers I've ever worked with, particularly since I worked with them for several years. But boy, these were a bunch of very bright, very headstrong engineers. And you had the stresses of a startup, I'm hiring them, we're trying to raise funds, so on and so forth. And I don't know where I got the idea, but I basically took them all off-site and asked each individual engineer, why are you here? Why did you come to Pages? You know, why did you apply? Why did you take this job? What do you hope to accomplish here over the next few years? And we wrote out all their goals so we each understood why everyone else on the team was there. And then I said, okay, now I want to set up team goals that will meet everyone's individual goals. And we did. We established a set of team goals, had a big whiteboard. And at that point, we became a team. Because we all knew why we were there. It was for different reasons. But we all had a common set of team goals that would meet our individual goals, or meet them sufficiently. And then we said, okay, how do our team goals align with the company's goals? Because we have to sell this to the company. So part of the purpose in having an organization chart is to figure out what it is people want to do. Sometimes people say, you know, I've always wanted to do this, or I've always wanted to do that, or I'm interested in this. And sometimes you're on a project, it's like, okay, I have to do this because this has to be done, and at this point, either I'm getting assigned it or there's no one else to do it. Oops. That's not my keyboard. That is. Possible roles and titles. By the way, these slides will be up. I'll post these up. So you don't have to write all this down. I always post my slides. I always post video of the lectures. The two roles that you must have on your org chart are project manager and a chief architect. We'll talk about more about this today. We've already touched on it some, but we'll talk about it more when we're going through the chapters out of Brooks. The essential divide here is that there's a classic story. You may have heard it, but I can tell you it's been told in software development circles for a long time. A group of tourists are in Europe, and they're visiting the workshop of this very famous artisan who creates these exquisite carved doors. And they just stand in awe watching him for about an hour as he's just doing this very fine chiseling and so on and so forth. And finally, one of them gets brave enough, clears her throat and says, excuse me, how long does it take you to complete one of these doors? And the artist looks up with this stricken look on his face and says, I never finish them. They come and take them away. Those are the two roles. The project manager is one who comes and takes it away. The architect is the one who's sitting there chiseling doors and saying, wait, I just had a great idea for this. The reason you need that tension, my first programming job was here at BYU. It started actually, I came back from a mission, changed my major to computer science, and immediately was working for the Translation Sciences Institute here on campus, which was doing computer-assisted language translation process. The idea is that you'd have this is being funded basically to help the church with translation materials. The idea is you'd have a human sitting at a computer with a text, some church material needed to be translated, and he or she would interactively analyze the text, resolving ambiguities, noting references for, predicates and so on. Then it would be converted to a neutral language form, and then it would be synthesized in several target languages. It was based on a theory of grammar called junction grammar by a linguistics professor here at BYU, Eldon Lytle, very, very bright. I have a great fondness for junction grammar because he took a couple classes in it. But here was the problem. We would progress, and I worked there for 4 years. We would progress, and it's kind of like we're getting better, and Dr. Lytle would come back about once a year and say, I've seen some better ways to do this. And I'm changing these aspects of junction grammar, and we need to reprogram the software to fit this model. And those of us who are programming, it's like, can you just let us finish something? We would do this reset about every 9 to 12 months with a new version of junction grammar and have to go back and change the code. and data structures and everything else to reflect this. So the architect is there for conceptual unity of the solution you have. The project manager is a person who basically says, I don't care how elegant you think it is or it is not. We need to ship by this date. So we need to start removing features, cutting things out, whatever we need to do to get it out. Other roles, designer, developer, quality assurance. I'm going to give you a whole lecture on quality assurance because one of the great malfunctioning areas, what's the word, dysfunctional areas of software engineering is that quality assurance is seen as at best a second-rate position. Having reviewed 150 failed projects, I can tell you that quality assurance is almost always a prime issue. We're just not, it's a bit like, software industry is a bit like Boeing is making airplanes saying, well, we really don't have the time to check to make sure that all the bolts are in place. We're just going to take the plane off and put it in production and see if it flies, and we'll hope for the best. Seriously, that's how a lot of software is built. Librarian, configuration management, user experience, user interface designer, tool builder. There are so many great tools out there now that we don't focus as much, I think, on building some of the specialized tools that can help us. But some of you have looked at using engines that already exist out there. These typically start out as tools for the companies that developed them, and then they said, oh, we can sell this out here. When I did Sundog, Frozen Legacy for the Apple II, I wrote more code developing tools for the game because I was basically doing everything. I did the graphics library from scratch, did the characters from scratch, everything else. So I had character editors, I had graphics editors, I had map editors, I had city editors, had dialogue editors, and actually wrote more lines of code, about 50,000 lines of code worth of tools for a program whose release version was about 15,000 lines of Pascal and about 5,000 lines of assembly. I also wrote a 6502/Pico disassembler, so we could disassemble the whole operating system and figure out how to plug stuff in. Graphics, sound, music artists. This is critical today, particularly in entertainment software. Oh man, the bar is so high. If you go out and you can go out on YouTube and you can find video of people playing the original Apple II version of Sundog, and you look at it and say, I can't believe how primitive that is. And it is. It is very primitive. As I said, I play games, and I look at these, and I just smile. It's kind of like I would have killed to have had a tiny fraction of this graphics and sound and physics capability when we were doing Sundog. Technical writer. I've done a lot of technical writing. I've written reference guides and software manuals for commercially sold development tools. A good technical writer is important. Database architect and designer. Okay, so if you've got databases in there, you want someone who is a good DBA. Sales, marketing, customer relations support. Okay, you guys probably not going to have that, but you can if you want. Now this is important because I noticed last semester this tended to get short shrift, which is, and you may say, well, an org chart, and there's like, 7 of us. How are we going to spend 49 hours on that or whatever? For each role in your org chart, besides here's the org chart, here's the person, at least currently assigned, you have to have this information in a separate document. What deliverables? And a lot of this you're not going to decide till later on, but generally speaking, what deliverables is this person responsible for? What approval or gatekeeper authority does this person have specific to what? You want the management communication lines with the team members. A lot of that will show up on the org chart. A description that's clear even if the title is not. Okay, software industry. We like goofy titles. And we had a lot last semester. I have a link here to the site, Silicon Valley Title Generator. So, and trust me, You will see these. You will see these all through Silicon Valley. Yes. Anyway, so and also note for smaller teams, you may have to collapse roles, and that's a natural function. I mean, Sundog, Wayne Holder and I were co-designers as far as the game design. Wayne did a few special effects. We had a few other junior programmers who came on who did a few special effects, and I did 90% of the coding. I was sort of, chief architect, tool builder, and bottle washer. So, y'all need to create, and actually, you can just start with the project proposal page. Go look and see how the project pages were organized in the winter semester. So, you want to create your team's repository to start checking in source code and so on. So I hope there's someone who here is really familiar with GitHub. It's willing to admit. Okay, so you've got someone in every team who's very familiar with GitHub. So make sure that's set up. What we're going to do, and this is going to be the standard process for all these deliverables. You'll have the deadline for the deliverable, midnight Saturday. The following Monday in class, I will do a presentation based on those deliverables. I'll either just pull them up off your wiki page, or in some cases, I'll put them in a slide presentation. And we'll go through each of them, and you'll each have a chance to explain, here's what we did and why. So you can plan on 5 minutes or so of talking through, okay, this is our org chart, this is why we did this, here's this, and so on and so forth. And for every single one of these deliverables, you have a chance to resubmit. In other words, I'll give you an initial grade, and if I have criticisms, I'll say, hey, you fell down here, this isn't clear, I don't know what this. And 2 weeks later, by 2 weeks later, you can resubmit, and however I grade the resubmit will be your actual grade for the deliverable. As I said, you have to really goof off not to get a good grade in this class, okay? If you show up and do the work, you'll get an A. It's pretty much the answer. So that's that. So let's go ahead and take let's reconvene at 10 after 3. We'll take a biology break. And like I said, when you